This story is titled, My Unfaithful Wife Came Home Late at Night from Her Lover, but I already knew everything and was waiting with a surprise. Hey Reddit, my name is Ryan, and I'm 29 years old. I've been married to my wife Claire for 6 years now, and I thought I knew everything about her. I thought I understood the rhythms of our life together, the way she moved through our shared space, the sound of her breathing when she slept beside me. But that night, when she came creeping home after what I now know was a hookup, the porch light revealed a nightmare I never saw coming. The door clicked open at exactly 3:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because I'd been staring at my phone screen for almost 2 hours, unable to sleep. I couldn't blink, couldn't settle my mind enough to drift off. The hallway was pitch black, but I could hear her breathing as she stepped inside. It wasn't that soft, sleepy kind of breathing you'd expect from someone coming home late from work or a night out with friends. Instead, it was quick and sharp, almost like she was calculating her next move, planning out each step before she took it. Claire always thought she was the smartest person in the room, and she had no clue I was still awake. That much was crystal clear from the way she moved through our house. Her hand fumbled for the light switch like she'd done this exact routine 100 times before, like she'd practiced sneaking in and out of our home while I slept. Then suddenly, light flooded everything, and our eyes met across the space that had once felt like home. Her pupils shrank as she looked up and saw me sitting there at the dining room table. I wasn't being dramatic about it either. There was no candlelight or staged confrontation bullshit. It was just me, her husband of 6 years, holding the mug she'd bought me for our second anniversary. The one that said, "World's Best Husband" on it in cheerful blue letters. It had never felt more like a cruel joke than in that exact moment. Claire froze completely when she saw me. Her black stiletto was still dangling from her finger, and she'd taken off her silver bracelet but not the necklace. It was rose gold, the same one I hadn't seen her wear in over 8 months. I'd never asked why she stopped wearing it. I figured it was just out of style or whatever. But tonight, she wore it like fucking armor, like it was some kind of protection against the conversation we were about to have. Her cocktail dress had a stain on the bottom hem that I could see clearly from where I was sitting. There was also a smear of burgundy lipstick pressed into her neck, and I had to squint to make sure. But I knew for damn sure it wasn't hers. Claire never wore dark red shades. She always went for pink or coral, colors that complemented her fair skin. She stared at me for what felt like forever, her eyes glassy and slow, like she was trying to boot up some script she hadn't rehearsed in months. I didn't say a single word at first. I wanted her to speak first, to see what lies she would spin, what elaborate story she'd concocted during her drive home. "What are you doing awake?" she asked, and her tone had that same annoyed frustration she used when the coffee machine broke on a Monday morning. There was no shock in her voice, no shame, no surprise at being caught red-handed. That's when I knew for certain that my worst suspicions were true. I stood up slowly, deliberately not moving fast because I didn't want her thinking this was some dramatic movie scene. No yelling, no fist slamming on tables, no theatrical gestures. I simply walked right past her toward the front entrance, where sitting on the entry bench was the shoebox I'd packed 3 days ago. It wasn't for me, though. It was for her. Inside that box were hotel receipts I'd found hidden in her car, printed screenshots of text messages, chat logs I'd managed to recover from her laptop. There were black lace panties that definitely didn't belong to her. Wrong size, wrong style, completely different from anything she owned. I'd also included a motel keycard from a place we'd never stayed at together. One I'd found in her purse when she asked me to grab her phone charger. I had it all laid out like evidence at a murder trial, but I wasn't the one making a case here. I'd already reached my verdict. Tonight was just the sentencing. She didn't even glance at the box when I set it down in front of her. She didn't ask what was inside, didn't show even a flicker of curiosity or concern. Instead, she just sniffed dismissively and walked to the refrigerator like nothing had happened. She grabbed a bottle of sparkling water, unscrewed the cap with a casual twist, and said, "You're being overdramatic, Ryan." I blinked once and just stared at her. She took a casual sip like nothing had happened, then looked at me as if she expected me to hand her a towel and ask her how her night went like some fucking doormat. The audacity of it was breathtaking. "You came home at 3:20 in the morning with your dress twisted around backward," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Do you want to keep lying, or should I go ahead and call Blake?" Her eyes twitched, just a tiny flinch, but it was absolutely real. "Blake?" she asked way too quickly, the name tumbling out before she could stop herself. "Seriously, you think I'm what, hooking up with your buddy now?" My best friend, I corrected her, letting the words hang in the air between us. She laughed then, a short and sharp sound like breaking glass. That's paranoid as hell, she said, still chuckling like I'd told her some ridiculous joke. God, you've always been like this. So insecure, it's honestly pathetic. That's when I walked past her again and dropped her iPhone right on the counter. The screen was still open, messages displayed in full view, with Blake's name right at the top of the conversation thread. That was the first time all night she actually looked scared. But it wasn't for the reason I expected. Not fear of hurting me or destroying our marriage. It was fear of getting caught. Fear of facing the consequences of her actions. The difference was subtle but unmistakable. And then something really strange happened. She smiled. Not a warm smile, not a regretful one either, but a slow, bitter curl of her lip like she was actually enjoying this whole situation. Like watching me discover her betrayal was some kind of twisted entertainment. You really dug deep for that evidence, huh? She whispered, her voice taking on an almost taunting quality. What now, you going to cry? Want me to get on my knees and beg for forgiveness? There are words for people like her, but I'll use the ones that actually matter. Cold, detached, merciless. The porch light behind her started flickering at that moment, and for a second, she looked like a complete stranger, wearing my wife's face like some kind of mask. I didn't know it yet, but this was only the first crack in everything I thought I understood about our life together. There were more coming, and they were going to hit a lot fucking harder. She didn't move from the kitchen, just stood there with the fridge humming behind her, that bottle of sparkling water sweating in her hand, and that same smug expression carved into her face like she knew something I didn't. I didn't speak right away because I didn't trust myself to say anything without losing it completely. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It had actually slowed down, like my body had already moved past the panic phase and found the cold, still waters underneath. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always scream at you. Sometimes it just settles in your bones like fog, heavy and suffocating, making everything around you feel distant and unreal. Claire glanced at the phone again. The screen had gone dark, but she knew exactly what I'd seen. The messages with Blake weren't vague or coded either. They were explicit, detailed, cruel. There were specific dates and times, phrases that got burned into my memory like acid. I can't stop thinking about how you kissed me in the back seat. He's completely clueless, so naive. I wish it was you waking up next to me instead. That last one absolutely gutted me. Not because of what it said exactly, but because it had been sent at 7:15 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, while I was downstairs making her scrambled eggs and toast, humming quietly to myself because I thought we were happy. What do you want me to say? She finally asked, her voice completely flat and emotionless. I raised my eyes to meet hers. I want the truth, Claire. Claire scoffed and took another sip, leaning against the counter like we were just chatting about weekend plans or some other mundane bullshit. The truth is, you're boring, Ryan, she said, each word deliberate and cutting. You've been boring for years now. You think just because you're not a complete asshole that automatically makes you a good husband? You go to work, you come home, you walk the dogs around the block. You've been sleepwalking through this marriage like it's some job with a punch card. Her words didn't land like punches. They didn't have to. They slid in under the skin, slow and deliberate like poison seeping into my bloodstream. I took a step toward her, not close enough to be threatening, just enough to speak without raising my voice. And that makes it okay to sneak around behind my back with him? I asked. With someone I trusted? She tilted her head and smirked at me with that expression I was beginning to hate. I didn't sneak around, she said matter-of-factly. You just didn't bother to look. That stung way more than it should have. I turned away, gripping the edge of the sink just to ground myself somehow. My hands were shaking now, not with anger or frustration exactly, but with something deeper than that. A kind of bone-deep realization that everything I thought I knew was crumbling beneath my feet. I kept thinking about all the times I'd made excuses for her, covered for her with our friends, defended her to my mom when she made those passive-aggressive comments about Claire's attitude. All of it felt like I'd been slowly painting over cracks in a wall I didn't want to admit was already collapsing. She spoke again, her voice softer now but calculated, like she was testing something. You're not going to leave me, Ryan, she said with absolute certainty. Let's not play pretend here. You don't have the guts. I turned back to face her and my voice came out low and steady. Try me! Her jaw clenched. For the first time that night, that smugness actually twitched, just for a second. But it was definitely there. The exact moment she realized something fundamental had changed between us. I walked past her again toward our bedroom. She didn't follow, probably thought it was some dramatic gesture, that I'd come back with teary eyes and a plea to work things out. But I didn't pack a bag or grab clothes or anything like that. Instead, I went straight to my desk and grabbed the manila envelope from the bottom drawer. Inside were printouts of bank transactions showing charges to hotels I'd never been to, a spare key to Blake's apartment building that I'd had made weeks ago, and a photo I didn't take myself. Someone had sent it to me from an anonymous number. It showed Claire's red Honda parked outside that apartment complex on a Thursday afternoon. She'd told me she was at a marketing seminar in Rochester that day, said it was mandatory for work, and she'd be home late. I returned to the kitchen and placed the envelope right in front of her on the counter. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. Her smile finally cracked completely, that mask of superiority sliding off her face for the first time since she'd walked through the door. "I've got more than just text messages, Claire." Silence. Complete, dead silence. For the first time all night, she didn't have some smart-ass comeback ready, didn't have another cutting remark or dismissive laugh. She just stood there, staring at the envelope like it might explode. I didn't say anything else. I just walked past her one more time, opened the front door, and stepped out into the night. The air outside was thick and humid, but for the first time in months, I could actually breathe properly. But this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The door shut behind me with a dull, final sound. But it wasn't peace that followed me out into the darkness. It was silence, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring, makes your mind churn, makes your chest throb in a rhythm you can't quite name. I didn't drive anywhere at first. I just sat in my car with the keys in my hand, engine off, staring out the windshield like the glass could somehow tell me what to do next. I didn't cry, didn't yell, but I didn't feel calm either. It was something worse than both clarity. The kind of brutal, unforgiving clarity that strips away every comfortable lie you've been telling yourself. I replayed the look on her face over and over, that smile, that flicker of something cruel under the surface. That wasn't the woman I married 6 years ago. That wasn't the same girl who used to write me stupid little notes on the backs of grocery receipts, who would curl up against me on Sunday mornings and talk about our plans for the future. This thing between us had rotted completely, and somehow she'd gotten comfortable living in the smell. The text messages were just the spark, but the fire had started long before tonight. I could see that now with devastating clarity. I opened my glove compartment and pulled out the burner phone I'd bought 3 weeks ago, right after the first message I saw on her smartwatch when she forgot to take it off before getting in the shower. She didn't even know it lit up when notifications came in. Rookie fucking mistake. Since then, I'd been collecting evidence, watching, waiting, documenting everything. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not my brothers, not my coworkers, not even my therapist. Just me and this cheap plastic device, buzzing with screenshots, photos, logs, backup passwords. I dialed the last number on the burner's call log. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Yeah? Greg, it's me, Ryan," I said. "You said if I ever needed confirmation." There was a pause. "You got it." I swallowed hard. I got everything. Greg was an old friend from college who does private investigator work now. He owed me a favor after I helped cover up a DUI he didn't want on his record years ago. I never thought I'd actually cash it in, but when I suspected something deeper than just a one-time fling, I reached out. "You want it in writing, audio, or video?" he asked matter-of-factly. "I got a clip," he continued. "It's short, but more than enough. Hotel room 318, Riverside Motel on 5th Street. I nearly choked on my own spit. That was where Claire claimed she went twice a month for her self-care spa weekends. I had even paid for a couple of them like an idiot, transferring money to her account so she could relax and recharge. "You sure it's them, Ryan?" Greg said flatly. "She kissed him in the parking lot right on the security camera, broad daylight. It's definitely them." I closed my eyes tight. "Okay, send it." When I hung up, I didn't go back inside. I didn't even look at the house. I just drove with no destination, just moving, just escaping from the suffocating weight of everything I'd learned. I passed gas stations, dive bars, a 24-hour laundromat, all of it blurred behind the tears I didn't want, but couldn't stop either. Not sobbing, just leaking, like my body was trying to drain out all the trust it had stored up for years. She had been with Blake, my friend, my best man at our wedding, the one who helped me pick out the fucking engagement ring, who spent hours with me at 3 different jewelry stores until we found the perfect one. The one who told me, laughing over beers just last month, that Claire was a real one, a keeper. I guess they laughed about that together now. The worst part, though, was that I started second-guessing myself. Like maybe I drove her away somehow. Maybe I didn't do enough as a husband. Maybe I made it too easy for her to lie and cheat. Maybe she was right about me being boring, about sleepwalking through our marriage. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about boredom. This was about character, or the complete lack of it. I pulled over at a 24-hour diner and sat inside for almost 2 hours. I didn't eat anything, just watched couples come and go, some arguing, some laughing, all of them with no idea how quickly it can all collapse. How sometimes the person you sleep beside every night can slowly start to disappear behind the face they wear for you. Until one day you realize you've been sharing a bed with a stranger. When I finally drove back, it was dawn. I didn't go inside, though. I stood on the front porch for a long while, staring at the door like it was the entrance to someone else's life. And in a way it was, because whoever Ryan was before last night, he was gone. Dawn's pale light filtered through the curtains when I finally pushed the front door open. The house smelled exactly the same. French roast coffee, faint lavender from her candles, but it felt hollow, like a stage set waiting for actors who'd already quit the play. Claire was on the couch scrolling on her phone. She looked up when I stepped inside, eyes sharp and calculating. No apologies, no remorse, just that same tired expression like I was interrupting her morning Instagram routine. "You're home early," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I didn't answer. I walked past her toward the kitchen and poured myself a glass of orange juice because nothing about today felt like a coffee kind of morning. She followed me like a shadow. "So what now?" she asked, arms crossed defensively. "You got your proof? You've played detective. What's the next move, Ryan? You want me to grovel, beg, cry on your shoulder?" I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. Someone cold, bitter, almost amused by the chaos she'd created. "I'm not here for a performance," I said quietly. "I'm here because this," I gestured between us, "this isn't working." Claire laughed, a low, harsh sound that filled the kitchen. "Not working?" she repeated mockingly. "You think you're the victim here? You think I'm the one who messed this up?" I blinked, genuinely confused. "Who else then?" "You," she said without hesitation. "The boring husband, the invisible man who stopped noticing me." She stepped closer, her eyes flashing with anger that seemed to come from somewhere deep and ugly inside her. "You stopped living, Ryan," she continued, her voice rising with each word. "You stopped trying. And don't give me that 'I was working hard' excuse. You made yourself invisible, and I found someone who actually sees me." I wanted to scream at her, to shake her until she understood what she'd done to us, to me, to everything we'd built together. But I didn't. I just swallowed the lump in my throat and tried to process what she was saying. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're done." She shrugged like it was the most natural thing in the world, like we were discussing what to have for dinner. "Yeah, I'm done. And you know what? I'm not sorry." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, the kind that leaves you gasping for air because you didn't see it coming. "You're not sorry?" "Nope, not one bit." She turned and walked away, leaving the house feeling emptier than ever. I sat down at the kitchen table, head in my hands, realizing this wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a battle for my dignity, and I was losing badly. The days that followed were a blur of cold silences and harsh words. Claire didn't try to hide her contempt anymore. It was there in every glance, every sarcastic comment, every deliberate step around me as if I was a ghost haunting her space. I started sleeping on the couch, not because I wanted to leave the bed she claimed, but because the emptiness between us was so thick it smothered the entire room. Every night I'd stare at the ceiling, tracing the cracks that had been forming beneath us for years, wondering when exactly the foundation had given way. She was ruthless now, the last remnants of kindness buried under layers of bitterness and lies. One evening I tried to talk, to find any flicker of the woman I loved beneath the mess. "Claire," I said, my voice shaking with the effort of staying calm, "why did you do this? Why?" She spat back without hesitation. "Because you made me want to disappear, Ryan. You didn't see me anymore. So I found someone who did. I wanted to argue, to tell her that I had tried, that I stayed late at work to provide for us, that I planned trips and birthdays and weekend getaways. But the truth was staring me down like a freight train. I hadn't seen her. Not really. I'd been there, but absent, going through the motions of being a husband without actually connecting. And maybe, just maybe, she had been right about that part. Yet the way she threw it in my face with such venom, such calculated cruelty, turned my gut ice cold. "I deserve better," she snapped, her voice full of righteous indignation. "And don't pretend you're some saint here. You made your bed." She was cruel and scornful, and she loved that power over me. But beneath it all, there was this unbearable sadness, like watching a fire you once built together burning down the house you shared. I didn't know if I could forgive her. I didn't know if I could forgive myself. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't stay like this, not with her venom poisoning every moment we shared. So I started thinking seriously about what comes next. Fighting for a marriage that felt more like a battlefield? Or walking away before it broke me completely? The weight of that decision pressed down on me like a storm cloud refusing to break. I was caught in this relentless tug of war between what I wanted and what was actually left. Claire didn't make it easy either. Every time I tried to sit her down and talk about where we stood as a couple, she'd mock me, biting and sarcastic, twisting my words like a blade designed to cut as deep as possible. "You want to save this?" she sneered one night, looking at me like I'd suggested something absurd. "You're absolutely delusional." One night after a particularly brutal exchange, she tossed her phone on the table with a careless flick of her wrist. Her eyes were blazing with defiance, daring me to react. "Here," she said, pushing the device toward me. "If you want proof, have fun scrolling. I don't care anymore." I stared at the screen, my heart breaking all over again at the endless stream of messages, selfies, shared jokes, and laughter. I wasn't part of any of it. This was her real life now, her actual world. And I was just the roommate who happened to pay half the bills. That's when I knew for certain this wasn't a one-time mistake or a moment of weakness. This was her choice, her deliberate construction of a life that didn't include me except as an inconvenience. I felt anger, sure, but beneath that was something much deeper. Exhaustion. A hollow, gnawing tiredness that settled into my bones like lead. I was tired of fighting for someone who clearly didn't want to be fought for. I was tired of defending a marriage to someone who had already moved on months ago. I reached out to my therapist for the first time in years, not to patch things up between Claire and me, but to find some kind of clarity in the chaos. She asked me what I wanted, and I couldn't answer. Did I want to fight for us? Or did I want to let go? I honestly didn't know anymore. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. I sat in the silence of our living room, surrounded by the trappings of a life that felt like someone else's dream. Photo frames with smiling faces that now looked like strangers. Furniture we'd picked out together that now felt like props in a play neither of us wanted to perform anymore. Claire packed a bag one afternoon while I watched her without any emotion left to spare. "Going somewhere?" I asked, my voice flat and tired. "Maybe," she said, her eyes cold as ice. "Far enough." No goodbyes, no tears, no last-minute attempt to salvage anything. Just the sharp snap of the door closing behind her. And in that moment, I realized maybe this was the only way forward. Maybe some things aren't meant to be saved, no matter how much you want them to be. But letting go, that was going to hurt more than anything I'd experienced so far. The house felt impossibly empty without her, but not because I missed Claire, the woman she had become. It was because it was the first time I realized just how much she had taken with her when she left. Her scent lingered faintly on the pillow, a cruel reminder of the nights I thought we were still together, still building something meaningful. The clothes she left behind looked strange now, like relics from a life that had already slipped through my fingers. I tried to focus on work, friends, the 2 dogs, anything to fill the void that kept growing larger every day. But every quiet moment dragged me deeper into this pit of questions and self-doubt. Loneliness wasn't the soft kind you read about in books or see in movies. It was jagged and sharp, an annoying ache that made every breath feel heavy, every step feel purposeless. Then came the phone calls. Not from Claire, no apologies or regrets from her end. Just Blake. His voice was smooth, almost too calm, like he was calling to check in on a job well done. "I know you saw everything," he said once, his tone casual as if we were discussing the weather. "Look, Ryan, maybe this isn't how you imagined things would go, but Claire's happier now. You should think about moving on." I wanted to shout, to slam the phone down, to tell him exactly what I thought of his advice. But I didn't. I just hung up and stared at the ceiling, wondering when my best friend had turned into a complete stranger. The betrayal didn't stop at Claire. It spread like poison, contaminating the edges of my life I thought were safe. At work, I was completely distracted, going through the motions but not really present. My boss pulled me aside one day, concern written across his face. You okay, Ryan? You've been off lately. I forced a smile and shook my head. Just personal stuff. The truth was, my whole world had collapsed, and no one could patch it back together. I started going to therapy more regularly, desperate to find some solid footing in the quicksand my life had become. My therapist asked me to write down what I wanted, not what I should want or what others expected from me, just what I actually wanted. It was the hardest question I'd ever faced because the answer wasn't simple at all. I wanted to feel whole again. I wanted to trust someone again. I wanted to believe in love again. But mostly, I wanted peace. And peace seemed like a distant dream that got further away every day. The nights grew longer and colder, even though it was still summer. I found myself wandering the empty rooms, tracing the outlines of memories like shadows on the wall. Every photo, every keepsake was a silent accusation, a reminder of what once was and what had been shattered beyond repair. Claire's absence became a loud presence, haunting every corner of the house. Her coffee mug still sat in the sink where she'd left it. Her bookmark was still in the novel she'd been reading, marking a page she'd never returned to. These small artifacts of our shared life felt like archaeological evidence of a civilization that had simply vanished overnight. One evening, a text lit up my phone. No name, no number saved in my contacts, just a message that made my blood run cold. You lost her, Ryan. Don't pretend otherwise. I didn't respond, but the message hit like a punch to the gut. Who was this? A friend? A stranger? Someone sent by Claire to torment me further? The anonymity made it worse somehow, this faceless voice inserting itself into my pain. I blocked the number and tried to move on, but then Claire showed up. Not at the door, not with apologies or explanations. She stood across the street from our house, just watching. I noticed her through the living room window. She was leaning against a car I didn't recognize, arms crossed, staring at our home like she was studying it. Our eyes met through the window for a long moment. No words were exchanged, no gestures made, just the cold recognition that something between us was completely dead. I wondered if she felt the weight too, the crushing finality of a love turned to poison. I didn't call the police or confront her. I just watched until she disappeared into the night, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night, I realized some wounds don't heal with time. They fester in silence, waiting to reopen when you least expect it. And no matter what I did, I couldn't escape the past, not when it followed me like a shadow. I tried to rebuild myself, not the marriage God, no, but me. Like piecing together a broken vase, holding the fragments carefully, hoping the cracks would become part of the design instead of the destruction. I started running again, forcing my legs to carry me farther than my mind wanted to go. I cleaned out the house systematically, room by room. Her clothes, her things, photos from vacations that now felt like they belonged to another lifetime. Every item tossed felt like a step away from the wreckage she'd left behind. But the hardest part wasn't the physical clearing. It was the mental unraveling, the questions that spun endlessly in my head. How did I miss the signs? How could someone I trusted so completely become a stranger overnight? Was I enough? Was I too much? Could I have saved this somehow? The questions had no answers, just endless loops of self-doubt and regret. One afternoon, I met up with an old friend, Kelly. She listened without judgment, offering no quick fixes or meaningless platitudes, just quiet understanding. For the first time in months, I talked without stopping, the words pouring out like water from a broken dam. I don't know if I can ever trust again, I confessed, the admission hanging heavy between us. She nodded thoughtfully. Trust isn't given, it's earned, she said. And sometimes it takes time to learn how to give it to yourself too. Her words stuck with me that night. I stared at the ceiling again, but something inside me shifted. Not a miracle cure or an instant fix, just a flicker of hope. Maybe, I thought, the pieces could be put back together. Not the same vase, not the perfect one, but something new, stronger, more real. And this time built on truth, not lies. Weeks turned into months, and the sharp edges of betrayal dulled, but they never fully disappeared. Some nights, the loneliness pressed in so hard, I thought I'd crack completely, the silence of the house weighing on me like a physical force. Other days, I caught myself smiling at a memory or the way the dogs chased each other in the yard, and felt a flicker of something I thought was lost forever. Genuine happiness that had nothing to do with anyone else. Claire tried to reach out once during this period. A text, then a voicemail left on my phone at 2 a.m. I ignored both without even listening to what she had to say. I wasn't ready to reopen old wounds, and honestly, I didn't want to know if her apologies were real or just another manipulation? The Claire I had loved was gone, and the woman who had taken her place wasn't someone I wanted in my life. Instead, I focused on me. Therapy sessions became a regular part of my week. Running turned into training for a half marathon I'd never thought I could complete. I reconnected with friends I'd pushed aside during the worst years of my marriage. People who welcomed me back without judgment or questions I wasn't ready to answer. I started small projects around the house, fixing the leaky faucet I'd been putting off for months, painting the guest bedroom, planting a garden in the backyard. Things that needed care and time, just like me. Each completed task felt like proof that I could still build something, even if it was just for myself. One afternoon, while organizing the closet, I found an old photo of Claire and me from our honeymoon. We were smiling on a beach in Mexico, her head on my shoulder, both of us looking impossibly young and hopeful. I stared at it for a long time, remembering that version of us, before the lies and the bitterness and the slow decay of everything we'd promised each other. Then carefully, I slid it into a box labeled Old Life. I closed the box with a quiet resolve, understanding something fundamental about myself and my journey. I'm not the man I was before this all started, naive, trusting to a fault, willing to ignore red flags because I wanted so desperately to believe in the fairy tale. Nor am I the broken version Claire tried to leave behind, the one who questioned his worth and blamed himself for her choices. I'm somewhere in between now, and that's okay. Because this experience taught me something no betrayal ever could. Some people don't deserve your loyalty, but you owe yourself the grace to heal. You owe yourself the patience to rebuild, the wisdom to learn from the pain without letting it define you forever. If you're reading this, stuck in the chaos of someone else's lies, know this. You're stronger than you think. The pain is real. The scars will stay, but your future, that's still yours to write. Don't let anyone steal that from you, no matter how much they've already taken. And as for me, I'm still learning to trust. Still figuring out what love really means when it's built on honesty instead of convenience. But now I'm doing it on my terms, with my eyes wide open and my heart guarded, but not closed. The phone buzzed again one evening while I was making dinner for myself. Another message from an unknown number, and I debated ignoring it completely. But something made me open it. Some instinct that told me this wasn't going away on its own. You think you won, Ryan? This isn't over. I stared at the screen, cold dread creeping up my spine like ice water. It wasn't Claire's style to threaten like this. She was cruel and manipulative, but this felt different. This was something darker, more sinister. Someone else was stepping into the chaos, adding their own twisted agenda to the mess my life had become. The next few days were filled with subtle reminders that I was being watched. A note slipped under my door with no signature, just the words, "Still thinking about you," written in block letters. A scratched tire on my car that I discovered when I came out for work one morning. Shadows lurking near the house when I got home late, always just out of clear view, but definitely there. I called the police and filed a report, but they said they'd keep an eye out while warning me that these things are hard to prove without concrete evidence. Unless someone was caught in the act or made an explicit threat, there wasn't much they could do beyond increasing patrols in the neighborhood. Claire denied any involvement when I confronted her during a rare phone call. "You're paranoid," she said, her voice icy with familiar contempt. "Just move on already." But I could hear something in her tone, not quite guilt, but knowledge. She knew more than she was letting on. The feeling of being watched gnawed at me constantly. I tightened my circle, kept friends close, and installed security cameras around the house. Every shadow seemed suspicious. Every unexpected noise made me jump. The peace I'd been building was crumbling under the weight of this new threat. One night while reviewing the security footage, I caught something that made my blood run cold. A figure standing in my driveway around 2 a.m., just watching the house. The silhouette was familiar, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a jacket I recognized. Someone I never expected to see lurking outside my home like a predator. Blake, the betrayal had evolved from a painful chapter into a haunting saga. It wasn't just about a cheating wife anymore. It was about reclaiming my peace from the shadows that lingered, from the people who thought they could continue to torment me even after destroying my marriage. I realized that healing wasn't linear, wasn't a straight path from pain to recovery. Sometimes the past reaches out with new hands to remind you it's still there, still capable of causing damage. But I also knew I wasn't the same man who once let betrayal define him. This time, I was ready to fight for myself, to protect the life I was rebuilding from those who wanted to see it burn. It all came crashing down one night, faster and darker than I ever imagined possible. Blake showed up at my door, not with apologies or excuses, just cold eyes and a smirk that dared me to respond. I didn't say a word, didn't flinch, because I knew the man standing before me wasn't the friend I once trusted. It was the architect of the nightmare Claire had dragged me into, and he was here to finish what they'd started. The confrontation wasn't loud or dramatic. No fists flying or shouting matches that would wake the neighbors. Just a silent reckoning between two men whose lives had been twisted together by betrayal, standing on my front porch under the same flickering light that had revealed Claire's lies months ago. "I wanted to make sure you knew," Blake said quietly, his voice carrying that same casual tone he'd used during our phone calls. "That she never loved you, that you were just her safety net." His words stung, but the real pain wasn't in his insult. It was in the truth behind it. Claire had used me, lied to me, treated me like garbage. She was the last thing anyone deserved in their life. Her lies, her disrespect, her complete disregard for what we'd built together. She'd shown her true colors when the light was on, revealed herself to be someone capable of cruelty I never could have imagined. But standing there, looking at Blake's smug face, I realized something important. I was done being their victim, done letting them control my narrative, my emotions, my sense of self-worth. They had taken enough from me, and I wasn't going to give them one more piece of my soul. I closed the door in Blake's face and locked it twice, hearing his footsteps eventually fade down the driveway. That night, I sat alone in the quiet, the weight of months settling around me like dust. But beneath it all, there was peace. Not the fragile kind I'd been trying to build, but something solid and unshakable. I had survived the storm she brought into my life. I had faced the worst betrayal possible and come out standing. The man who had once questioned everything about himself, who had blamed himself for someone else's choices, was gone. In his place was someone who understood his worth, someone who refused to accept less than he deserved. And I knew this for certain. Some endings hurt like hell, but they make space for new beginnings. They clear away the rot, so something healthy can grow in its place. Claire was gone, but I was still here, stronger, wiser, and finally free from the poison she'd been feeding me for years. If you're stuck in a hell like I was, believe me, there's a way out. It's messy, it's painful, but it's possible. You just have to hold on long enough to see the light breaking through the darkness. And when you do, don't look back.